Henri Murison, Director of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership, is here with us. What's going on?
I mean, I think none of us really know, Kay. And before any decision's made, my understanding there'll have to be a meeting of the Cabinet. To do that during Tory party conferences for something like this is pretty unprecedented. So I don't really know what the Prime Minister's playing at. He always said he was a big fan of Northern Powerhouse Rail. That is dependent on HS2, that northern leg. So that's also a big area. Will he be cancelling that as well, all for his pothole funds, which I know has been pointed out by the opposition he cut as Chancellor? So it feels like this is a Prime Minister who says one thing, does another. It also feels like he's trying to trash Boris Johnson's legacy, trash the net zero stuff. Now he's trashing big infrastructure. Anything that the Tories have done in the last few years since the 2019 general election seems to be something he wants to distance himself from. Well, this far out from a general election, what on earth is he going to run on? He's not going to be running on any record, is he? And for a Prime Minister who's part of a government that's been in power for 13 going on 14 years, to not have any legacy to show, just a series of disconnected, slightly random policies, it just doesn't feel good enough, does it, Kay? It's not what you'd expect from someone in his position.
Two ways of looking at this. There's no votes, really, and fewer votes in the North West for Conservative government than there would be for the Labour Party. But also, it's too expensive.
Well, we polled, Helm and Opinion polled last week the Tory-held constituencies here in the north of England, including the marginals. And what was interesting was that we had significant support, well, sort of more than half supported still building the legs to the north. But what was particularly interesting was that Conservative voters were more supportive than voters in general. And I think that does create a problem for the Prime Minister politically, which is that it does feel, doesn't it, like Boris Johnson is more connected to those seats, not just even the Red Wall ones, but those more traditional Tory marginals that David Cameron and George Osborne, obviously a big proponent of this project, managed to win in 2010. It just feels like this is a Prime Minister who isn't really in touch with the part of the country that he represents in Parliament. He is at the end of Yorkshire MP. Isn't also really in touch with what he says are his core principles. This is supposed to be kind of Rishi Reset Week, I read from the kind of right-wing talking heads. And the challenge with this is that 6 years ago, I sat with Rishi Sunak across in the Radisson Hotel when he was a backbench MP, keen, enthusiastic. And he was saying to me, this Northern Powerhouse Rail thing, it's what I want to campaign for, it's what I'm really passionate about. And then he's on the... Well, when he met with me 6 years ago when I first met him, and I was sat with him then, and he said he made it his life's mission, and then he convinced Boris Johnson, once he was a junior minister, when he was one of the three horsemen of the apocalypse, when he backed Boris Johnson along with Jenrick and Oliver Dowden, he was allowed to pick one policy. And he rang me, I was on holiday with my kids, I had to pull the car over when I was driving back from somewhere to talk him through what he was going to sell to Boris, because he was so keen to do this, and he needed the detail.
Happened?
I think that the challenge for him is he doesn't really know what he's actually for anymore. So despite this supposedly being about reset, he seems to be more bothered about refighting battles he had in Cabinet with Boris Johnson, because the stories are clear. Boris wasn't always that interested to listen to Rishi when he was the Chancellor. Boris never a fan of the person who thinks they are the cleverest kid in the class. Obviously, he was the most popular kid in the class, wasn't he, always? That's what he wanted to be. And so my sense is...
Was he, though? Was he?
Well, I mean, that's another... Yeah. I mean, that's a little bit...
Don't take me off the tracks to continue the pun.
I mean, it's a good analogy for this situation, isn't it? So staying on the tracks feels like, because Rishi Sunak felt he wasn't consulted properly on these big infrastructure projects, his response is to cancel them. And I mean, that's the sort of petulance that if my 6-year-old displayed at home, I would tell her off for. I'd expect better from the person who runs the country. It's time for the Prime Minister to grow up and join the grown-ups in the room. Former Prime Ministers, not just Tory ones, but for the matter of, we're at the conference, David Cameron won 2 elections, Theresa May just managed to win 1, Boris won 1 convincingly. He's not someone who's ever won an election.
Did David Cameron win 2 elections?
It was
2010. I'm not sure he won that one.
But anyway, those were people who've actually won something with a mandate. I know. I mean, and a journalist, you should be a pedant. I shouldn't be able to get away with being fast and loose. So my sense would be, those are people who actually won elections, as well as Gordon Brown. He didn't win one, but with Tony Blair, he was part of winning several. These people all say this is in the national interest, and regardless of short-term political calculation, regardless of the inside ball of the Conservative Party, where I'm sure I was with people like Fraser Nelson last night, they think this is a great idea. Well, Fraser Nelson thinks lots of mad things are a great idea. The British public are not where he is. Do you mean the British public are not where people like that are? They are in the centre ground of British politics. That's where you win elections. This is a Prime Minister, I think, who doesn't really think he can win this election. Yeah. He's just trying to keep his own party happy. Do you mean be remembered for being a bit of a mover and a shaker, someone who shook things up? And it's like, this isn't some tech billionaire's plaything. This is our country. And in the north of England, the business community, the wider civic leaders, and most importantly the public, are not going to stand for this, Kay.
Please come back and talk to us again. Sadly, we are out of time.
Thank you,
I was
Kay.
saying to my colleague just yesterday, centrist politics, that's where you're going to win the general election. Where will this fall? We'll have to wait and see. For now,
Thank you,
thanks very
Kay.
much indeed. Thanks a lot.